Today's episode is titled The Authority of Christ and the Ongoing Work of the Spirit. And before I say anything else, let me start with humility. I don't claim to know everything, and I'm not above correction. I'm not here to debate anyone or attack anyone. I'm simply being faithful to my calling, and that calling is to teach what Scripture actually says. If Scripture says it, I submit to it. If Scripture doesn't say it, I won't pretend it does. Recently, I heard a message that stirred a lot of conversation, not because the pastor was malicious. His heart was to protect the church from deception, and that's a real concern. But sometimes, in trying to protect people from one danger, we accidentally create another. And the message left people confused. They stayed after service talking for 20 minutes. My sister even encouraged me to teach on it. So that's what I'm doing today. Not to correct a man, but to clarify the word. The message said the apostles had the authority to heal at will. It said their ability started diminishing. It said no one has the gift of healing today. It said healing only happens through elders. And it said God doesn't use individuals like that anymore. And I want to walk through this with scripture because when you misunderstand who the authority belongs to, you will misunderstand who God can use. The disciples never had authority of their own. Paul never had authority of his own. Elders never had authority of their own. All authority belongs to Christ. He said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given unto me. Authority in Scripture never means personal power. It means delegated responsibility under Christ. If the authority is His and He is alive, then His authority is still active. The apostles didn't heal at will, they healed at obedience. They didn't walk around deciding who to heal, they responded to the Spirit's leading. They were vessels, not sources, participants, not possessors. If Paul healed at will, he would have healed Paul. He would have healed Trophimus. He would have healed Timothy's stomach. He would have healed Epaphroditus. He would have healed his own thorn, but he didn't because he wasn't the source. Christ was. So the idea that their power started diminishing only makes sense if you believe they had personal power that could fade, but they didn't. Christ had the power, and Christ doesn't diminish. The Spirit had the power, and the Spirit doesn't diminish. The only thing that changed in Paul's life was his circumstances, not Christ's authority. Then there's the claim that no one has the gift of healing today. Scripture never says the gift will stop before Christ returns. Paul said the gifts will cease when the perfect comes, and the perfect is Christ himself. Until he returns, the Spirit is active. The gifts are active. The church is empowered. The gifts were never tied to the apostles. They were tied to the Spirit. And the Spirit didn't die. Stephen wasn't an apostle. Philip wasn't an apostle. Ananias wasn't an apostle. The 70 weren't apostles. Unnamed believers weren't apostles, yet they all operated in gifts. If the gifts belonged only to the apostles, none of these people should have been able to operate in them. But they did, because the gifts were manifestations of the Spirit, not badges of the apostles. Then there's James 5. James 5 is beautiful, it's biblical, it's pastoral, but it is not the only way God heals. If healing required elders, then Jesus healed wrong, the apostles healed wrong, the 70 healed wrong, Ananias healed wrong, Philip healed wrong, and the early church healed wrong. But scripture shows God healing through individuals, through groups, through elders, through non-elders, through apostles, through non-apostles, even through shadows and cloths. James gives a model for community care, not a restriction on God's power. If James 5 were the only way, then God would be limited by human availability, geography, church membership, and structure. And God is not limited. And I want to say this with love. A message that says God can't use one person anymore, on, or that the gifts ended, or that healing only happens through elders is misleading and spiritually dangerous. Not because it's malicious, but because it unintentionally shrinks God. It replaces faith with fear. It discourages believers from calling on Jesus directly. It creates a passive church instead of an empowered one. It contradicts the entire biblical pattern of God using ordinary people. It creates confusion instead of clarity, and it teaches a smaller God than the one Scripture reveals. But I also want to keep this balance. Gifts don't prove maturity, fruit proves maturity. Gifts simply reveal the generosity of the Spirit. And if you want to walk in the power of God, don't chase gifts, chase Jesus. The gifts follow the presence. So here's the truth I want to leave you with today. The apostles didn't heal at will, they healed at obedience. Their power didn't diminish because they never had power. Christ had the power, and Christ doesn't diminish. The gifts didn't end because the Spirit didn't end. And God still uses individuals because He always has. The authority is Christ, the power is Christ, the name is Christ, and He is still alive. The authority of Christ didn't fade, the Spirit didn't retire, the kingdom didn't shrink, and the church was never meant to live powerless. Thank you for joining me today on By What Authority. The episode is titled The Authority of Christ and the Ongoing Work of the Spirit. My heart is simple: to honor Scripture, to magnify Jesus, and to equip the church to walk in the truth without fear, without confusion, and without limitation. Christ is still the authority, Christ is still the healer, Christ is still the giver of gifts, and Christ is still working through His people today. I'll see you next time.